What is good, Epic 7 fam? Pat here, back with another video, and in this one we'll be talking about the custom Mystic Summon. This video will be done in a very similar style to my custom group summons, if you've seen that as well. It will be slightly different in terms of editing because we're going to have to talk about something north of like 40 characters in this video. So in order to keep the runtime of the video down, we'll just go through things a little bit quicker. But I will try my best to, as always on screen, give you best use cases as well as additional use cases for each character. And basically my overall recommendation on why you should choose a particular character versus another one. Before we get into it though, we first have to talk about what the actual custom Mystic Summons are if you don't already know. So once you hit rank 10, you can come here in the summon section and find custom Mystic Summons. You will have on the left the option to choose a Moonlight 5-star hero of your choosing, and on the right a Moonlight 4-star hero of your choosing. Once you lock in those two choices, as soon as you start summoning, you will be stuck with those choices until June 9th, which is when you will be allowed to switch them out for a different character if you so choose. You'll notice down here in the lower left, additional opportunity for selecting a 4-star and 5-star Moonlight hero. 1 month left. That is June 9th is when you'll be able to actually choose that. And when you summon, just like you would on the custom group right here, these summons, you will get coins for each summon that you actually make. You can see I have done 32. This is essentially the currency that you're going to use for the pity. If you go into the shop over here, you can see once you've rolled 200 times, you can get the 5-star hero that you so chose. And in this case, it's going to be Operator Sigret for me and Great Chief Kawana because she's the only 4-star that I do not have. So if you get the character, that's great. And if you get them early, that's even better. You should save these currencies until July 20th or so when this actual banner ends. At June 9th, again, you'll get to choose a different 5-star. So if you've already got the one that you wanted, you could switch to another one on June 9th. But I would not spend any coins until July 20th because essentially, let's say you pull Operator Sigret in this scenario early on, right? Like I pulled this very early in say the next like 5 to 10 summons. That's cool. I can then essentially carry these coins over into the second half after June 9th and purchase a different character. So again, you want to hold them as long as possible until you can make an informed decision on what to actually end up spending them on. Because once the Sage Vivian banner ends up coming out, you will not have access to any of these coins anymore. So they're just gone forever. So for that reason, and it's really important, do not go into the custom Mystic Summons unless you have roughly around 10,000 Mystic Medals to spend or the means to actually get the custom Mystic Medals that many. So basically what I'm trying to say is you have to make peace with the fact that if you go into these custom Mystic Summons and you don't have enough to at least pity one of the characters, you have to be okay with losing all of the accumulated rolls at this point, because you'll notice that any rolls you make do not decrease the actual Mystic Summon banner, which is what Vivian and all new Moonlight 5-stars will end up being on eventually. So it's really important. You only go into this if you have the means to actually get it, or again, you can make peace with the fact that any progress you make is potentially going to be lost if you cannot pity the character. So there you go. That's the introduction. With that out of the way, we will talk about all of the Moonlight 5-stars first, including the 7 that I think are the best ones and the ones that I think you should prioritize first if you do not have them. After that, we will discuss all of the 5-stars. And then to round out the video, I will talk about some of the 4-star picks that I think are worth your time. Just like with the custom group summon video, this first section is going to be on mandatory pickups. These are the 7 Moonlight 5-star heroes that I think add the most value to your account. I'll talk about why I think each of them are good, give you best use cases, as well as optional use cases, and why I think you should pull them. The first one, of course, is going to end up being Conqueror Lilias. Conqueror Lilias is one of the most impressive characters they have ever made in this game, and that is for a couple of reasons. First off is this 121 base speed. She is the fastest warrior in the game, and she has one of the better speed stats in the entire game. She's an excellent turn 1 opener, and her S3 for Honor is one of the most debilitating turn 1 skills in the entire game. It not only removes buffs from the enemy team, but also gives them an attack down and provides your team with an undispellable buff called Vigor, which gives your whole team 30% extra attack and defense. That defense, by the way, when combined with the decreased attack, makes your team incredibly tanky. So this is a really powerful disruption skill as well as a support skill. On top of that, it grants her an extra turn. This S2, which she'll probably use as her next turn, gives her a barrier as well as a provoke on a target. It adds greatly to her survivability and again cements her role as a disruptor and an amazing opener. And then finally, her S1, Kneel Down, essentially gives you a random dual attack on your team, which can translate into extra DPS if you need it. So she literally does everything. She makes your team tankier, she's very good at disrupting, and she provides your team a lot of damage. She's pretty much the best turn 1 hero in all of PvP, in all of the game modes. So you should essentially be choosing Conqueror Lilias if you want to be competitive, I think, in any of the actual PvP game modes in this game. She is incredibly powerful. It's not just there, though. She's also very good in Hell Raid. She's also fairly good in Hall of Trials. She's one of the best Hall of Trials characters in the game. And while we haven't really had any Abyss stages since she came out, I can already foresee her being somebody that you would even consider playing in Abyss. So pretty much she's the total package. The primary reason to choose her is if you want to, again, be competitive in PvP. But she's really good in almost every single game mode. And I think she's one of the top choices overall. My second choice is going to be Fallen Cecilia, who is, in my opinion, the game's premier tank. She's been around for almost 2.5 to like 3 years at this point, and I really don't think that there is a better raw tank they've released yet other than her. Basically, she should be the tank that you're considering first and foremost before all others. And if you are a turn 2 player, someone who doesn't have a lot of speed gear and likes to play a bruiser or tank playstyle, you need this character in your repertoire. Why is that? Because she has this passive Strong Instinct that gives your entire team a barrier for 2 turns, as well as gives somebody a barrier at the end of each of her turns. She just provides a slew of damage mitigation with just this alone, and she can hold Aureus, which, as you know, in my opinion, is one of the best artifacts, if not the best artifact in the game. Those 2 things alone, just the barriers and the Aureus, makes her an insane damage mitigation source. On top of that, she has Spear of Resentment, which gives your whole team a skill nullifier, which when used strategically can block out a whole ton of damage against your entire team. And then her S1 is a 100% chance to provoke, which is very powerful and again reinforces her role as a tank. Again, she's not always going to be the best option. There are characters such as Adventurer Raz or even like Red Cecilia that are good in other game modes such as Abyss or Expedition. She's again not going to always be the best option, but she's almost always going to be in the conversation, especially in PvP. If you're serious about PvP, and again, you're that turn 2 bruiser tank player, you really should pick up this character. Next up, let's talk about Apocalypse Ravi, who is one of the game's premier bruisers. She is incredibly difficult to kill thanks to her S2 passive War God's Might. It provides her healing whenever she would receive damage, and in a lot of scenarios, players might not actually be able to out-damage the healing that she gets from the passive, so it just makes her feel immortal in a lot of situations if your opponent just doesn't have a dedicated answer to her. On top of that, her S1 Spectral Axe has respectable damage as well as injury, which means that she can grind out games very easily. So if you're trying to play a long game against Apocalypse Ravi, it's usually not going to go in your favor. And when your HP gets really low, she can use her S3 Deliverance Soul Exchange, which does a ludicrous amount of damage for a single target attack. If your HP is low, that's pretty bad for you too, because if it ends up getting a kill, it ends up turning into a revive for Apocalypse Ravi and her team. So this character is pretty much the total package. She's very tanky, she has very good single target damage, and she functions as a reviver, which is traditionally one of the most broken things in PvP. If you are a turn 2 or bruiser player that's interested in PvP, it is definitely worth your time to pick up Apocalypse Ravi. She's also very good in Guild Wars as well, as not only an offensive character, but a defensive character. So if you're looking for a good Guild War defense character, she is amongst one of the absolute best. Other than that, her uses are pretty much limited to, like, say, Adventure, if you're having trouble killing bosses, or something like Hell Raid. So you don't get too much value out of picking her for something other than PvP. But again, if you're that bruiser and or tank player, I think you need this character in your roster. Next up is Specter Tenebria, who is, in my opinion, the game's premier DPS. If you're looking for only a DPS, this is the one to choose if you don't have her already. Her S1 Poison Blast is arguably the best basic attack skill in the entire game. It has very good damage, it attacks multiple heroes, it cannot be counterattacked, and it also inflicts poison, which means that she naturally has synergy with something like the Rage set, which enables her to be one of the strongest damage dealers in the game for PvE, especially for Abyss and Hall of Trials. On top of that, her S2 passive Nightmare Illusion makes her very difficult for enemies to play against in PvP, and also provides her an insane amount of damage overall. She also has some good CC and amazing single target damage for something like Hall of Trials, thanks to this S3 Endless Nightmare. So yeah, again, the total package DPS, if you only care about picking up a strong damage dealer, you pretty much cannot choose anyone better than Specter Tenebria. Again, she is literally excellent everywhere. Name a game mode outside of like Expedition, and she's probably in the conversation for best in the entire game. Next up is Mediator Kawerik, aka Hand Guy. Hand Guy does a lot of things in one very convenient, very tanky package. His skill set is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. He has something for pretty much every single scenario in PvP. His S3, which is his signature skill, Nature Restoration, basically makes him immune to debuffs while also being a cleanser for your team. So pretty much if you're losing to debuffs in PvP, he's pretty much going to be the best option. But even if you're playing against somebody who isn't someone who has debuffs, this still gives your team immunity and an attack buff for 2 turns. Attack buff is arguably one of, if not the best buff in the entire game for PvP. It also gives him a huge chunk of combat readiness. His S2, Balance of Power, is a full dispel against one target as well as an attack down, which allows him to essentially disable one target and take them out of the fight for a short period of time. On top of that, it provides a huge barrier to your team, which means it can protect allies as well. And then finally, his S1 Retribution is one of the best S1s in the game because it gives combat readiness to a person on your team, and that person is always going to be the highest CR target, which means that this S1 allows you to essentially cut in front of enemies and potentially steal games. He just does everything you could possibly want on a support, and he has a whopping 7,323 base health, which is like amongst the highest, if not the highest stat in the game. So if you really need a strong support and you are having trouble with debuffs, you should choose Mediator Kawerik. He is excellent. Next up is the Windex girl herself, Belian. Belian makes this list for a couple of reasons, the first of which is her S2 passive, Shackles of Suppression. This turns off enemy soul gain by 100%. This means that opponents cannot actually use souls against you, and it turns off artifacts such as Tehagel's Ancient Book. This is incredibly powerful, and it completely stuffs a lot of cleave and control compositions just by her sheer existence. On top of that, she is an Ares Knight, which means she is a very tanky character that is very difficult to kill, and she has 110 base speed, meaning she's also reasonably fast. Her S3 and S1 are both AoE attacks that provide things such as Provoke, as well as a Blind and a Slow, and she essentially has very good multipliers also. So you're getting essentially a bruiser that rains down AoE damage and debuffs, denies very troublesome compositions like Cleave and Control for the most part, and she can also be built on injury, which makes her a nightmare for bruiser teams as well. She's just a very valuable pickup, and there are a lot of scenarios where if you pick her in something like World Arena, she is for sure going to slam dunk win you the game unless they ban her. And then obviously she has use cases in things such as Automation Tower, as well as Guild War offense and defense. Just again, a very solid bruiser, very similar to Apocalypse Ravi. If you are that like turn 2 player and you're having trouble with, again, certain things that usually the turn 2 bruiser / tank players are having trouble with, you really should try to get Belian and add her to your roster. Some of you are probably wondering who was going to make the 7th slot on this list, but if you know me, you probably already could guess, and that is Ruele of Light. I know she doesn't seem as insane as some of the other characters that I put in this group, but if you've watched any of my videos for a long time, you know that I feel like Ruele of Light is one of the best Soul Weavers, if not the best Soul Weaver, for a new or intermediate player. She completely changes the landscape of your entire account. She has great single target heals and cleanses. She's insanely tanky thanks to her 798 base defense, which is amongst the best in the entire game, if not the actual best. And her signature skill, Light Ascending, is a revive with full HP and invincibility for 1 turn. No strings attached. So yeah, this character pretty much does it all. She's not very flashy, by any means, but she is an amazing safety net for new and intermediate players. And if again you're that turn 2 tank or bruiser player, you're probably going to want to have this character in your roster. She's been viable pretty much since the beginning of Epic 7. She's been either a high or top tier pick in most metas, and she trivializes a lot of content also in the game. If you're struggling with things like, say, Hell Raid, she's very good there. She's a pretty solid pick in Abyss as well, and you can use her for things like Automation Tower, even Advent. She's just great pretty much in any PvE sort of content, and she's probably, at least in my opinion, the best Guild War offense unit in the entire game. She is just, again, that amazing safety net, allows you to make mistakes, especially if you don't have the best gear. I just think that Ruele is a true game changer, and I don't think I could have made it as far as I did in Epic 7 up to this point without her. Now that we've done the mandatory 7, we are going to go over every other Moonlight 5-star in the game, aside from Lionheart Cermia, as well as Pirate Captain Flan. And if you're wondering why, it's because you cannot choose these characters on the custom Mystic Summon. So sorry if you were looking to get them, but there you go. So the next one to talk about is Judge Kise. Judge Kise was a character I think that I was very harsh on in my which Moonlight 5-star you should choose from the Moonlight Connection video that I first did on this channel. And yeah, she isn't really much better in that role either. She's still absolutely terrible as a damage dealer in my opinion. However, I do think that she is worth choosing, and it's not just for her big personalities this time or her amazing skin if you have it. And that is, right now, she is one of the best disruptors, turn 1 disruptors in the World Arena meta. Her S3 Wave of Light is a very powerful skill reset on the enemy team. What that means is you can use her to deny characters such as Mediator Kawerik or potentially any other openers. If you can get a very fast Judge Kise with high effectiveness, if she somehow takes turn 1, Wave of Light is again very backbreaking, and it makes her an incredibly solid pocket pick in high-end World Arena. So if you are looking for a disruptor against characters like, say, Mediator Kawerik or even like Rimuru Tempest, she can be that pocket pick for you. She's just, again, a very strong 4th, 5th pick in this current meta. And I think, again, that gives her a lot of value to some players. So if you're looking for that niche, she could be, again, that answer for you. Next up is one of my favorite Moonlight 5-star heroes in the game, and that is Little Queen Charlotte. If you guys have been a long-time watcher of my channel, you know how much I love this character ever since I made a guide for her here. She just does a lot. She's one of the best bruisers in the entire game. I think she's a little bit worse than characters like Apocalypse, Ravi, Belian, and Hua Young at the moment, but she's pretty close. She's, again, just a really powerful bruiser for the most part. Her S1 Judgment does amazing damage, gives immunity, which means that she's hard for control players to deal with. Her S2, A Queen's Dignity, makes your team tankier and functions similar to an adamant shield, also provides her combat readiness. And then her signature skill, the Will of the Mare, absolutely just dumpsters pretty much every single dark unit in the game, and that's our primary niche. If you need a strong bruiser that lends itself to a tanky playstyle and want somebody that can deal with a lot of the problematic dark units in this game, such as Apocalypse Ravi or like Archdemon Shadow, heck, even like somebody like Fallen Cecilia, you can kind of rip through her as well with with Little Queen Charlotte here. So yeah, that's her primary selling point, is as an anti-dark character that also doubles as an off tank. And that just makes her, again, an excellent pocket pick in World Arena. She's also very good in Guild Wars as well. And she has some fringe uses in things like Hell Raid, for example. Next up is Ambitious Tywin. He is in a very interesting spot. His primary selling points are his S2 Battle Command, which essentially is a cleanse passive for your entire team, and his S3 Flash, which is an AoE speed down as well as a stun. Basically, Tywin is a cleanser that is really good in formats that are very slow and do not favor very fast units. He also doubles as a control finisher with this S3 Flash again. Basically, he's not a bad character right now. He's actually a very good character. It's just not his metagame. Back in the Golden Boys meta, it very much favored slower bruiser teams with, tanks like Fallen Cecilia, and that's where he really shines. That's currently not the meta we're in. It favors very fast heroes like Conqueror, Lilias, and Peyra, and it also favors a lot of single target damage dealers like Hua Young and Reamer Tempest. This S2 passive battle command is one that works really, really well in AoE damage-based metas. So again, Tywin is a very strong pick, just not this meta, and I think if you want him, he is still a rather respectable choice. Last Rider Krau is basically in the same boat as Ambitious Tywin. This is simply just not his meta. His defining feature is his S2 passive code number 00, which gives you a barrier every time that he and his team are hit with an AoE attack. It also lowers the cooldown of his S3 mobile weapon Siegfried, which is an AoE true damage nuke that provides his team with immunity. So yeah, he obviously excels in metagames that are all about AoE damage. We are in a meta that is about fast heroes and a lot of single target damage, so he is really not in favor right now. It's not that he's a bad unit, it's again just not his meta. So if you want him, he's worth choosing, and again, you can just have him waiting in the wings for when the time finally comes for him to rise once again. Specimen Sez is basically a meme at this point. He is somebody who is meant to assassinate targets with a huge single target damage move as long as they're stunned. The problem is getting stuns in this format is like pulling teeth. There's cleansers pretty much everywhere. Immunity from characters like Mediator, Kawerik as well. He just doesn't really feel like he fits in anywhere. And if you were going for a stun-based team, you would probably just be playing something like Summertime Iseria anyway, as she could just clean up much faster than somebody like Specimen Sez is. His kit just feels very outdated and just really unreliable. Really, you should only be picking him if you just really like the character and you just think that his gameplay pattern is pretty fun, which admittedly it is. It's just not very good. Next up is Spirit Eye Celine, who is basically the goddess of Guild War offense. Her sole purpose is essentially to deal with dark characters in Guild Wars. So if you're struggling against characters like, say, Apocalypse Ravi, she's going to be an amazing pickup for you. That is because essentially dark characters, their AI will always prioritize light characters. So if Spirit Eye Celine is the only light character on your team, you can basically set a trap for the AI, which can enable some very easy wins. Her S2 passive Sixth Sense means that she only takes 50% damage from any hit, and then her S3 gives her the possession status, which gives her counterattacks on every critical hit, as well as lifesteal. What that means is that Apocalypse Ravi will always attack Spirit Eye Celine, never be able to kill her with any of the attacks. You will counter and hit her very hard and get back all the damage that was dealt to you, and essentially you'll just slowly whittle them down and use this S3's revive mechanic as kind of like a safety net in case the rest of your team ends up dying. That's pretty much her only real use, because Reamer Tempest and like Specter Tenebria basically make it nearly impossible for you to ever play her in any other PvP game mode. But, there are times when lightning strikes where there isn't like a Reamer or a Specter or a ton of AoE attacks and the stars align, and somehow you might be able to play Spirit Eye Celine, in which case she feels really broken. Again, super cool character, one of my favorites, but really only good in Guild War offense. Faithless Lidica is a character that I cannot really recommend in good faith, pun not intended for the most part. She's just a relic of the past. She has this 114 base speed, but has a kit that screams, "I'm an opener." She just really is never going to get a turn that allows her to do her job, because they're just way faster openers like Conqueror Lilias, Peyra, Ran. There are characters like Assassin Sid that are hard for her to deal with. Characters like Blue Kise. There's just so much stuff that outspeeds her. So she just falls in this scenario where if the stars align, like with Spirit Eye Celine, you might actually get her through in a draft where she might be really, really effective. My problem is, in those same scenarios, there are characters that we'll talk about later on that can do something similar, which is be a strong opener, but can also hard carry a game. Faithless Lidica is kind of like an opener that resets the cooldown of one character and is generally very annoying, but doesn't wrap up a game in a hurry like some of her other peers. Sage, Baal, and Sezan used to be one of the best heroes in all of Epic 7. They are still a very, very strong pick, but just not as oppressive as they once were back in the day. The primary reason to choose Sage, Baal, and Sezan is for their S2 Cloud of Ruin, which has a combat readiness passive component built into it. Basically, this is a very strong control hero that also doubles as a speed contest hero. Essentially, there are teams that use characters like, say, Ron or even like a Pavel Cleave that you might be able to get the jump on and sleep them all and essentially secure a game win. If you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of speed gear, Sage, Baal, and Sezan might be that answer that you're looking for those kinds of compositions, simply because they get the extra 15% at the end of most people's turns. And considering turn 1 is usually a setup turn, there is a fair chance that Sage, Baal, and Sezan will be able to cut in front of them and steal the game for you. So yeah, that's the primary reason to use them. And again, they have some pretty cool use cases where you can play them on speed, on counter set, resist set. So there's a lot of flexibility in the build options. But again, the primary reason to choose this is if you're someone who likes to play control, or you're looking for, again, that really strong speed contest hero. Next up is Silverblade Aramintha, who also used to be one of the most overpowered characters in the game. And she's actually the opposite of Sage, Baal, and Sezan. The kind of teams that Sage, Baal, and Sezan excels at are the kinds of teams that you want to be putting Silverblade Aramintha on. With her most recent round of buffs, I think she is much better and a viable pick, but she still has that same boom or bust gameplay style. Silverblade Aramintha is either going to feel really amazing for you or feel like a wasted pick. It's for that reason I don't think you really should go for her unless you really like her aesthetic and you are a very aggressive player, somebody who likes to play these very fast teams that win in one turn. She doesn't really have too much usage elsewhere. I had success with her in the most recent advent, and there might be some fringe cases and hard content going down the line that she might be great for, but for the most part, she's essentially a character that you slot into your Guild War offense team, your Arena offense team, or World Arena when you're trying to wrap things up in a hurry. Solitaria of the Snow used to be a meme unit that was only good for countering focused-based heroes, but now she's actually a fairly competent meta pick. Her S2 passive, I Want to Go Home, provides her stealth pretty much always, which means that she kind of functions like a control version of Specter Tenebria. Her S3, Boom Starlight Fall, is a stun that basically goes through immunity at the start of a battle, and also gives her a barrier which keeps her in stealth longer. She's just a very good character to have access to turn 1 or turn 2 to disrupt your enemy opponent. And she does provide some decent damage on her S1, pew pew pew, because it essentially is an extra attack always, which means it has great synergy with Fairy Tale for a Nightmare. Again, really good character to build fast if you were looking for a disruptor, somebody that can kind of shake it up and make it so that your opponent's game plan doesn't really always work the same way. She might be worth considering for you. Just again, very overall solid pick in a lot of PvP game modes. Not too much usage outside of that though. She's not really a PvE hero. So again, if you're looking for a strong control character and or possibly turn 1 disruptor, Solitaria might be for you. Desert Jewel Basar, aka DJB, is one that I cannot really recommend. He just is completely outclassed by Mediator Kawerik and Designer Lilibet at this point at the cleansing role, so his only real use is for the combat readiness on his S3 Bastat Roar, and that's only really viable right now because of the Battle Frenzy changes, which give a bonus amount of speed to a lot of Soul Weavers. The second that they take that Battle Frenzy away, this character just suffers and doesn't really have a role. I don't really think Desert Jewel Basar is going to be a good pick for a lot of players because there are RGB 5-stars that do comparable jobs at what he's meant to do. And again, the Moonlight 5-star versions of cleansers such as Designer Lilibet and Meteor Kawerik just do his job so much better. He's basically just a poor man's Amelia at this point. Maid Chloe is a very powerful Soul Weaver that's on the same level as characters like Ruele of Light as well as Amelia, and that's thanks to her very powerful S3 VIP treatment. It gives your whole team a revive buff, revives any dead allies, cleanses 2 debuffs from all of your allies, and provides them all with an attack buff for 3 turns. That's a very overloaded skill, packed with some of the best features that you can find on any support in Epic 7. She also provides your team with a little bit of healing with Mage Cheer, and provides a useful bonk stun in her S1 Heavy Strike. So yeah, really rock solid Soul Weaver in almost any game mode. Pretty much, if you are looking for a Soul Weaver, I think she's the one to choose. It's between her and Ruele of Light. I think Ruele is a bit better because she is tankier, and she's also a much better pick in the current meta of World Arena, but there's no denying that at one point Maid Chloe was downright oppressive and one of the best characters in the game. Also, she's super cute, she's getting an RTA skin, and as a final bit of trivia, she has the same voice actress as Fallen Cecilia. The king of resident sleeper gameplay, Dark Corvus is a very powerful single target DPS that is only really good against AI. Essentially, you're going to be picking him for Guild War offense as well as attacking in arena against very tanky comps that are deliberately very slow. He doesn't do super well against the very fast openers that are in the current meta, which is why you'll probably never see him picked in World Arena. But for the defenses that are playing characters like, say, Ruele of Light or like Fallen Cecilia with a bunch of other characters, it is possible for you to just tank up and essentially fully charge his S3 Devil's Descent, which is pretty much a one-hit KO when you soul burn it against the entire cast of the game, and it provides extinction, which means those revivers can't really cycle and, you know, revive all of their allies and kind of draw the game out. That's pretty much what you're using him for, as a tank buster against slow defenses that are on either Guild Wars or arena defense. That's pretty much it. He's not really good anywhere else. Designer Lilibet is another meta cleanser alongside of Mediator Kawerik. I think Mediator Kawerik is good in almost every single scenario, whereas Designer Lilibet is a little bit more niche. She is a lot more punishing when the opponent has a character like Conqueror Lilias or Pera, for example. She will almost always cut in with her S2 passive Emergency Stitching here and get the increased defense buff, which allows you to essentially cleanse your whole team then with Model Disqualification, get a bunch of combat readiness for your team, as well as some cooldown resets on the enemy team. She's basically a cleanser that is really good against aggressive compositions. Again, very, very strong pick. Not quite as good as Mediator Kawerik because, again, her Model Disqualification is not a true cleanse. It doesn't get rid of all debuffs, and on top of that, there are certain ones such as bombs that she cannot get rid of, whereas Mediator Kawerik can. So against a character like Summertime Iseria, she really doesn't do the job there. That doesn't take away from the fact that she's still a very powerful pick and one of the better options, especially if you're somebody who is a turn 2 player that struggles with a lot of the debuffers and strong openers in the current format. I still don't think Martial Artist Ken is the meme lord that everyone makes him out to be. He's still a really powerful pocket pick in some scenarios. You can pick this character as a 5th pick in some World Arena games in high end, and as long as he's built properly with high effect resistance, he can essentially solo the enemy team. That's pretty much his usage. He's just a counter pick in very, very oddly specific niche scenarios that just auto win the game. Or he's pretty good on Guild War offense when you know that the enemy AI will always go into him and he basically will have a free win in that scenario. So yeah, very, very niche character, but still a pretty cool character. So if you're a fan, I don't see any harm in picking him up, especially if you have a lot of the other staple units in the game. Man, Straze really feels like he fell off, didn't he? He used to be one of the most prevalent picks in all of World Arena, but since characters like Rand, Pera, and Conqueror Lilias came out, he doesn't really see a lot of play, and that's largely because of his speed tier. He's at 109 speed, which is not enough for him to reliably take his first turn when he has no actual survivability. So as such, he's really only relegated, it feels like nowadays, to Guild War offense. He pairs amazingly well with characters like Amelia, Maid Chloe, Luna, even Closer Charles. He's very, very good with those kinds of characters, and his primary role is to just be a tank buster with his S3 Star Extinction. You use it to get rid of characters like, say, Fallen Cecilia, Apocalypse Ravi, Belian, Blue Krau. If any of these are characters that you struggle with in a Guild War offense setting, Straze can be that kind of cleave option for you there. And you can still use him in World Arena as long as, you know, those really fast openers that I talked about are banned, and you pair him with a character like, say, Closer Charles. He can still work as a surprise 4th, 5th pick option. Other than the Guild War offense option, he is an amazing hunt character, by the way. He is capable of one-shotting a lot of the hunts in the entire game. So if you're looking to farm something like Azumatic 13 or something like Katie's 13, if you pair him with Watcher Shuri on a banner together, that's basically a starter kit for farming almost every hunt in the game very, very quickly. Speaking of fell off, Arbiter Vildred. This man used to be a literal god of Epic 7, and he is not anymore. He is very much a niche pocket pick, I feel like, in World Arena these days. He is very good in scenarios where he's going to be your 4th or 5th pick against teams that are very squishy and don't have a lot of mitigation. Basically, those control or cleave teams, you can pick him into them, and basically they're going to have to either ban him or going to have to immediately find an answer to him, because he'll still eventually rip through them. Doesn't have the damage to deal with like a Hua-Yang or an Apocalypse Ravi anymore. Still definitely has the damage, though, to kill certain squishies, like, say, a Flan, for example. So yeah, that's his primary usage in World Arena. Still very good in Guild War offense, and he's still rock solid in a lot of PvE content. You still see him used for things like Azamantic 13. You can use him for, say, Hell Raid. You can use him for Abyss in a lot of scenarios. So yeah, still a solid pickup. If you've always wanted this character, I don't see any problems with still picking him up. He's, again, still good in many scenarios in the game. Just, again, it feels a lot worse because he literally used to be the god of the game, and now he's kind of like a bottom of high tier pick in a lot of scenarios. The character that we alluded to in Faithless Lidica is actually Closer Charles. He is basically everything that Faithless Lidica wishes she could be. He is not only an opener, but he is, as his name implies, a closer thanks to his S2 passive, Closer. It basically makes it so that his S1 elimination has an extra attack called Demolition that makes him essentially a hard carry. This character is very good in Guild War offense when combined with heroes like Luna or Straze, and he is very good in scenarios where either all of the very fast openers that are in a speed tier above him are banned, or your opponent is a turn 2 bruiser player. You can essentially pivot to a Closer Charles plus Straze cleave, and if they just don't have a speed contest or an answer to it, you can essentially sweep them, sweep the win right out from underneath them. It's just very powerful composition, very powerful pivot. He is a very slept on character, I feel like, for the most part. Again, really strong. You see him again with those characters like Straze, like Luna, and I've even seen Korean Jesus use him with Baiken. So yeah, again, really underrated pick. If you're somebody who is looking for a pivot option into cleave, he's one of the ones that you absolutely should have access to. Remnant Violet is, in my opinion, one of the premier single target DPS in the game. He's a relatively safe pick in the middle portions of drafts in RTA. You don't really give up too much by choosing him. Like, for example, if you chose a red, green, or blue unit, it becomes much easier to counter you. Remnant Violet's counters are usually ones that not everyone has access to, or it puts them in a situation where if they draft them, it opens them up to being exposed to more hard counters. So that's why I think he's a relatively safe pick for those of you who are kind of like standard players. He is, again, a very powerful single target DPS option thanks to his S3 Massacre. This can outright kill a lot of characters in the game, especially if your opponent doesn't have mitigation. So if you ban their Fallen Cecilia or tank, it's very easy for you to get a pick, especially if you're on a speed Remnant Violet. Very good Guild War offense character for the same reason. You can just kind of send him in there, pick off a key target very easily, and it's really good. I think the only drawbacks to the character are the fact that if he doesn't dodge, he gets this evasion buff from his S2 concentration. If he doesn't dodge and he dies, you feel like your character has no value, and that's really frustrating. And he also requires very good gear to get the most out of him. So if you have just okay gear, if you're like a newer or intermediate player, you might really not get the most out of the character. He just might feel very lackluster compared to some of the other ML 5 stars on this list, but still excellent option to have in a lot of scenarios. Briar Witch Iseria is one that I find to be very hard to recommend to people for picking up on this banner. She suffers from the same problem that Kairon has. She's relatively squishy, and she's relying on her S2 immortality buff in order to survive in a format where it is very easy to be hit with unbuffable. So she's going to basically drop like a fly. She's not super fast, so she's not really going to get the first turn. She's got that 114 speed, so she's in that same tier as Faithless Lidica. The primary times that I see people pick Briar Witch Iseria, it's because they're looking to get the unbuffable from her S3 Cursed Thorn. for example, say they pick Angel of Light Angelica, and they really need to get an unbuffable on my team in order to secure a match. They'll pick like a 5th pick Briar with Iseria as kind of like a bit of desperation. But I don't really find, like, again, it usually works out. She just feels a little outdated and a little outclassed by some of the other unbuffable characters. Again, this S2 passive that requires you to have no unbuffable on you to get the immortality to survive to a second turn is not something that is well suited for any of the metagames right now, whether that's going to be Arena, Guild War, or World Arena. Next up, we come to Operator Sigret, or OpSig for short. This is the one you saw me choose at the start of the video, and that is because she's an excellent DPS and support option. Her defining features are both her S2 and her S3. Her S2, Annihilation, penetrates 100% of the target's defense if they have a shield, which makes her an excellent counter pick to heroes like Fallen Cecilia, as well as Hua Young. And then her S3, Obliterate, is not only a strip against the enemy team, but it also pushes back the enemy team and provides your entire team with an attack buff, all while having pretty respectable damage. She just fills a lot of roles on a lot of teams. She's just an excellent pocket pick to have in a lot of scenarios, whether you're a cleave player or even a turn 2 player that is, again, trying to counter something like, say, Hua Young or Fallen Cecilia. Archdemon Shadow, who is sometimes referred to as Archdemon Mercedes or a Meru, is a very, very powerful pick overall if you're serious about either Guild Wars or World Arena. I was debating putting her in the must-have picks, but I just don't think she quite makes the cut. Her primary feature, the main reason to play her, is the Seal passive on her S1 Touch of Chaos. Seal turns off passive skills, and this is an ability that is unique to Archdemon Shadow. That means any character with a very debilitating passive, she's excellent against. She is one of the better options against Apocalypse Ravi, for example. She can turn off things like Seaside Bellona and things like that. The shields from Fallen Cecilia, you can get rid of those as well. So yeah, really powerful effect on her S1. On top of that, she has this S2 Twisted Power, which not only provides her with some form of damage reduction, but a slew of small, very weak AoEs that come out at a very high frequency and add up over the course of a match, especially if she's on the artifact Fairy Tale for a Nightmare. So she's kind of like a very bulky bruiser that is also a debuffer that will do a ton of AoE damage if she's left on the board over time, while again also eliminating a lot of passives. She just has a very good matchup spread. I feel like overall she doesn't feel OP, but she feels very good in a lot of matchups, like most matchups. She's just like we were talking about Remnant Violet, an excellent safe pick in the 3-4 slot when you're not really sure what to take, because she just has, again, just a exceedingly well-rounded matchup spread across the entire game. And I think that's really what gives her a lot of value. I personally think top model Luluca is one of the worst choices you can make on this banner, and that's largely because the character doesn't really have an identity. She's kind of like Blue Luluca in that case. Sure, you can play Blue Luluca for Wyvern or Expeditions or like Abyss, but very rarely is she the best option. The 3 places that you used to see top model Luluca played are Cadiz, Expeditions like Pain Pursuer Moroi, as well as an Extinction unit in World Arena. When it comes to Extinction in World Arena or Guild Wars, honestly, why play her over Milim? Milim does pretty much the same thing easier, is harder to kill than top model Luluca, and doesn't expose you to things like Politis or Celine because you're not using a non-attack skill. And you don't need to actually have a specific hard to get artifact like, say, Dignisorb to get the character to actually do the job. You basically only need a 4-star like Tehagel's to get comparable or better performance. So if you have Milim, she pretty much does everything top model Luluca does in that game mode, and there are collabs coming back around, so if you don't have Milim, there's a good chance you'll probably have her within the next 4 to 6 months or so. When it comes to Cadiz, you see characters like Straze and Commander Larina easily outperform top model Luluca, whether that is as a regular farm or a one-shot. In Pain Pursuer Moroi, you have Sirmia, Green Euphine, and Zealot Carmen Rose, which are all infinitely easier to acquire, outperforming this character as well. So yeah, there's not really a reason to pick top model Luluca unless she really is your waifu for laifu, in which case nothing I said in this video was going to sway you otherwise. Let's end the Moonlight 5-star section on a bang with Blood Moon Haste. He is a very niche character that doesn't always work, especially now in a meta where there's a lot of unbuffable characters like Para. But when he does work, man, does he feel really broken and like one of the best characters they've ever made. His S2 passive Grudge gives your team a massive barrier as well as the immunity buff whenever an enemy is revived. If you ever see Arbiter Vildred or somebody like, say, Maid Chloe, or even like a Rowana on the enemy team, you can absolutely feast on them with Blood Moon Haste. If they are willing to trigger some kind of revive at all, you just get so much value. The S3 here, Moon Slash, is a very powerful true damage nuke that heals your whole team, and when it's available also doubles as a damage mitigation source. This is a really crazy powerful S3, especially if you pair it with something like Portrait of the Saviors. He can just outright delete squishier characters at like the 12 or 13k or HP less mark. It's just really, really good, and if they revive that character, cool, that's fine. You get the cooldown reset on Moon Slash and you can just kill them again. So yeah, when he works, again, he feels like one of the best characters in the game, and I think he's an excellent pocket pick for people who are struggling against Arbiter Vildred or Maid Chloe in certain World Arena ratings or even in Guild War offense. Okay, to wrap up the video, let's very quickly talk about the ML 4 stars. I think there are 6 that are very good for almost everyone, and you should pick those up first and foremost. And then I think there are 5 other ones that are worthy of your consideration. For the top picks, let's start off with the most obvious one, which is Angel of Light Angelica. This isn't really a Moonlight 4-star. This is really an ML 5-star in disguise. They super overtuned this character, if you don't already know. She just does so much. For starters, her S2 passive Guardian of Light is a mini cleanse that gives your team a skill nullifier whenever your opponent uses an AoE attack. She's also immune to stun, which means it's very difficult to disrupt her from doing what her first turn is most likely going to be, which is Judgment of Angels. This is an AoE unbuffable and silence that is a non-attack skill, which means that it's just pretty much always going to land for the most part. Yeah, one of the most debilitating opening skills in the entire game, right up there with Conqueror Lilias, as well as Rand, just one of the best openers in the entire game. On top of that, her S1 is Ritualistic Touch, which is a silence as well as pushes back the target if they're actually already silenced after the move lands. So yeah, just really overpowered character. And if you're serious about PvP at all, you really should try and get her because she's just better in PvP than almost every other Moonlight 4-star I could recommend. Next up is Watcher Shuri, who, if you do not already have, I highly recommend. I think he is the second best overall option after Angel of Light Angelica if you do not have him. And that is because every single style of player can get value out of Watcher Shuri. His primary selling point is his S3 finishing shot, which is a 100% defense penetrating single target nuke. This is one of the best moves in the entire game for farming. If you are looking to farm the Cadiz or Azumanic Hunt at all, Watcher Shuri is pretty much the best character in the game for that. He's also excellent for cleave, and he also has a speed imprint, which is the most desirable imprint in PvP in the game because it gives you a small boost to speed, which might allow you to take turn 1 in a cleave mirror, which can win you the game. Again, I just don't think that there is an account that doesn't benefit from Watcher Shuri. He's just good in RTA, he is good in Guild Wars, and he is arguably one of the best farmers in the game. He's like a god tier farmer. Again, if you don't have him, highly recommend you pick him up and start building him. Next up is Specimen Sez. He is the premier speed contester for most of you watching this video. He has a whopping 128 base speed, which means only really Rand is able to contest him for turn 1 realistically in the current meta. There are so many fast threats in the entire format like Conqueror Lilias, Blue Kise, Red Kawerik. Specimen Sez has the speed as well as the damage and also the CC in a form of a silence on his S3 execution to deal with all of them. If you're having trouble with some of the hardest to deal with characters in the game and you have decent speed gear laying around, it is worth it for you to pick up and invest in Specimen Sez. He's just an amazing pocket pick in World Arena, and he deals with some of the most cancerous Guild War defenses for free. Next, let's talk about Kitty Clarissa. Kitty Clarissa is one of the better PvE heroes in the game, and you don't really need to invest super heavily in her. As long as she's level 50 and you have one Mulligora in her S3, I'm so cute, meow, she will end up doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. She is one of the best overall characters in the entire game in Abyss, and she is probably tied with Sinful Angelica and Conqueror Lilias as the best Hall of Trials character in the game. If you are having trouble with later stages of Abyss, or you're looking to clear Dagger Sakaar missions at all for Hall of Trials, you're gonna need Kitty Clarissa. And even if you're not interested in them, she is one of the best expedition characters in the entire game, and she can also function as a pocket cleanser if you have very high effect resistance in other game modes. Just a really rock solid character that doesn't really require a lot to get going, and I think she adds a tremendous amount of value for how little you actually have to put into her. Sinful Angelica is a very powerful support that also is one of the best options in a number of game modes in PvE. In PvP, she's primarily used as a budget answer to revivers with her S2 passive Soul Harvest. Think of her kind of like a less useful, less desirable Blood Moon Haste in a lot of scenarios, but man, does this character shine in PvE. Just like Kitty Clarissa, she is arguably one of the best, if not the best, Hall of Trials character in the game. She's also insanely useful in certain floors in Abyss. She's pretty much a staple if you're trying to clear some of the harder floors very easily. And then on top of that, she is the best tank for Wyvern 13 in the game if you're able to accomplish a Wyvern 13 one-shot. I have a video here on this channel if you're looking to learn how to do so. Again, character just provides a lot for your character in the later stages in PvE, which is why I think everyone should try to take advantage of the opportunity to selectively pick a 4-star and pick one that will have a lot of late game value for you. If you've watched any of my videos at all in the How to Play series, you already knew this guy was going to show up in the most recommended ML 4-stars. I put this guy, I feel like, in almost every single one of my recommendation videos, and for good reason, guys and girls. His S2 Chivalry provides an absolutely massive 40% damage share to the character that is in the backline. That makes him one of the best options for protecting a specific character in the entire game. He is an amazing mitigation source. His S1 that he counters with, Pledge Guard, is also a stun, which is the best form of CC in the game. And his S3, Oath of Protection, is not only a cleanse, but when combined with his exclusive equipment, is also a combat readiness push. So this character does it all. He protects, he can be a cleanser, and he can also CR push to get the offense started or to help a DPS secure a specific turn or kill on a key target. He's just really good, and if you don't have Fallen Cecilia, he's one of the best characters you can possibly build for PvP. And even if you do have her, he's better than she is against Cleave in certain scenarios. So he's still somebody you're going to want to have invested in and built. He's just a staple, I feel like, for most Bruiser and Turn 2 players and newer players who don't really have a lot of speed gear or a lot of good tank options. Alright, to round out the video, to try to not make it super long, let's quickly highlight on some of the other 4-stars that I think are worth your time but aren't as good as the ones that we've already discussed. The first up of which is going to be General Purgus. I think he is a great option for intermediate players that are still farming Wyvern 13. If you can't do a Wyvern 13 one-shot, but you're still using a tank like Angelic Montmorency, Angelica, Crozet, Rose, Krau, this character just feels like a strict upgrade, and as such I think you should pick him up because he will improve your clear speed, in which case you'll eventually start to see more gear quickly, which will allow you eventually to progress to the late game where you can start getting into those Sinful Angelica based clear compositions. After that, we have Crimson Armin. She's a rock solid tank, but the reason I didn't recommend her over Troublemaker Crozet is I think he has more use cases than her, and I don't think she's as good as Fallen Cecilia, and since you have access to Fallen Cecilia, you would have probably chosen Fallen Cecilia if you were looking for a powerful tank. Crimson Armin, still a really solid option, just not as good as a character like Fallen Cecilia or Krau or Troublemaker Crozet, at least in my opinion. Fighter Maya is another great option for newer or intermediate players if you struggle with a character like Arbiter Vildred, or you're having a lot of trouble with the debuff-based teams that you see a lot in Guild War defenses like Para or like Summertime Iseria. Fighter Maya basically shrugs off all of those debuffs and cracks them right in their head and gets you some free game wins. I have a guide for her here on this channel if you're looking for one. After that, we have, got to scroll down a bit here and find her. We have Bloodblade Corinne, very, very powerful anti-cleave character in the same way that Arbiter Vildred is used. You can pick her 5th pick against cleave characters, and if they have no way to remove her immortality buff, she can essentially just cleave them with her S3 Blade Art Dragon. Very powerful anti-cleave character. Also very good in a lot of PvE game modes as well. Things like, say, Automation Tower. You can use her in Hell Raid. You can even use her in certain Abyss floors like the newest challenge mode, which I just most recently cleared with her. So yeah, rock solid character in a lot of game modes. Just very, very competent DPS overall. And then the last one to talk about is Champion Zerato. Just like with Fighter Maya, very good character if you're struggling against teams with debuffs. There are better options than him a lot of times, but he is still a very good option, especially in Guild War offense. He does win against those Summertime Iseria style compositions a lot, and you can use him to cheese certain things like Golem Hunt, for example, if you're trying to farm that. So he does have some inherent value for most people that are watching the video. And that's going to do it for my thoughts on the custom Mystic Summon banner. Hopefully this was of some help to you. You can help me out if you haven't already by remembering to like the video and subscribing if you're not already. If you want to, feel free to check out any of the other guides that I have here on my channel. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch y'all later. Bye-bye.